luxury finishes. I'll tell you what that looks like. Cardboard. My name's John. I'm 42 and I've been an accountant for nearly 20 years. I know when numbers don't add up. The same goes for drywall that bends when you touch it. 3 months ago, a guy named Blake Morrison took $80,000 from me, promising to transform my family's home in Spokane into something we could be proud of. What I got instead was crooked electrical outlets, baseboards that didn't meet in the corners, and plumbing that sounded like a dying animal. Blake stood in my half-finished kitchen, hands on his hips, like he owned the place. "That's just the primer coat showing through," he said. "Once we get the final layer up, you won't even notice." I ran my finger along the edge of a cabinet door that hung at an angle. The wood felt cheap, nothing like the solid oak he'd promised. "When's that happening?" I asked. "Soon as my crew gets back from the Henderson job. Maybe next week." Next week. He'd been saying that for a month. My wife, Claire, had been cooking on a hot plate in the garage while our kitchen sat gutted. My 8-year-old daughter, Megan, kept asking when she could use her bathroom again. The master bathroom had been torn down to the studs 6 weeks ago. Blake kept finding new complications that required more time, more materials, and more patience. I watched him pack his tools into a beaten-up toolbox. Most contractors I knew treated their equipment like their livelihood. Blake's looked like he'd bought it at a garage sale. The drill bit was bent. The level had a crack through the bubble, and his measuring tape stuck every few inches. "You'll hear from me Monday," he said, heading for the door. Blake. He stopped, but didn't turn around. The contract said completion by the end of August. It's September 15th. "These things take time, John. Good work can't be rushed. Good work." I'd been documenting everything since week 2, when I first noticed the outlets weren't flush with the walls. I had photos of every corner, every fixture, every surface that didn't look right. My accounting background taught me to keep records, and something about Blake's operation felt off from the start. The way he paid his workers in cash, the way he never had permits ready when I asked, the way his phone went straight to voicemail whenever I called with questions. After he left, I stood in what used to be my living room and counted 17 things that weren't right. 17 things I could see without even trying. It made me wonder what was hidden behind the walls. I'd worked hard for this house. 15 years at Tarnor Digital, running numbers for their financial department, saving every bonus and overtime. Check Claire and I could. We'd bought the place when Megan was 2, a solid 1980s ranch that needed updating but had good bones. At least that's what Blake had told me when he knocked on my door back in June. "John Morrison," he'd smiled, like we were old friends. "I'm Blake Morrison, no relation, but hey, great minds think alike, right? I've been doing work in the neighborhood and I couldn't help but notice your place has real potential. I should have asked for references. I should have checked with the Better Business Bureau. I should have done a dozen things differently. But Blake had shown me photos of other homes he'd renovated, sleek kitchens and modern bathrooms that looked like they were straight out of a magazine. He'd quoted me a fair price for what he called luxury finishes that would add $30,000 to your home's value. Claire was skeptical from the beginning. "Something feels rushed about him," she said after he left that first night. "Why is he pushing so hard for us to sign right away?" But I wanted to give Megan the kind of home I never had growing up. My dad was a machinist who believed in fixing things himself, even when he didn't know how. Our house had always looked half-finished with gaps in the trim and paint that didn't quite match. I didn't want that for my daughter. The warning signs started early. Blake's crew showed up late most days, sometimes not at all. When I asked about permits, he'd wave me off, talking about streamlining the process and connections at City Hall. The materials that arrived never seemed to match what we'd discussed. Instead of the solid wood cabinets I'd picked out, cheap particle board showed up. When I questioned it, Blake explained it was an upgraded composite material that's actually more durable than traditional wood. 2 weeks in, I caught one of his workers urinating in my backyard instead of asking to use the bathroom. When I mentioned it to Blake, he just shrugged. Miguel's got a shy bladder. Happens sometimes. By month 2, I noticed Blake's demeanor changing. The friendly contractor who promised to treat my home like his own had become short-tempered and evasive. He'd started avoiding my calls, showing up without notice, and leaving projects half-finished for days at a time. The electrical work looked amateur with wires sticking out of walls and switches installed crooked. The plumbing made strange noises, and the water pressure had dropped throughout the house. But it wasn't until I found Blake in my garage going through boxes without permission that I realized I was dealing with something more than just a bad contractor. "What are you doing in here?" I asked. Blake froze, my toolbox open in his hands. "Just looking for a Phillips head screwdriver," he said. "Thought you might have one I could borrow." I pointed to his truck where a full set of tools sat visible through the open tailgate. "You've got a whole workshop right there." "Oh, right." He set down my toolbox, but not before I noticed my good drill had disappeared from its usual spot. Found what I needed anyway. That night, after Blake and his crew left, I walked through every room with a notepad and wrote down everything that bothered me. Not just the obvious problems, but the details that didn't make sense. Light switches installed upside down, bathroom tiles that weren't level, kitchen cabinets that didn't close properly, and baseboards with gaps wide enough to stick my finger through. I called my brother-in-law, Derek, a union electrician for 20 years. "John, you need to stop this guy right now," Derek said after I described the electrical work. "Half of what you're telling me sounds like fire hazards. When's the last time he pulled permits?" "He said he'd handle all that," I told him. "Show me the permit numbers. Every legitimate job has them." I spent an hour searching through Blake's paperwork and found nothing. When I called the city building department the next morning, they had no record of any permits for my address. "Sir, any electrical or plumbing work requires permits," the clerk explained. "If someone's doing that work without them, they're operating illegally." I hung up the phone and sat in my truck for 20 minutes, adding up the numbers. $80,000. 3 months of my family living in construction chaos. Work that could be dangerous enough to burn down my house or poison our water supply. And a contractor who'd been lying to me from day one. When Blake showed up that afternoon, "I was ready. We need to talk about permits," I said. "Already told you I've got connections. Everything's being handled." City Hall has no record of any permits for this address. Blake's expression shifted, the friendly mask slipping for a moment. "Sometimes the paperwork takes a while to process. Bureaucrats, you know how it is. I called 3 times. They've never heard of you." "Look, John, I've been doing this for 15 years. Do you want me to spend half my time shuffling papers, or do you want me finishing your house?" I looked around at the chaos that used to be my home. Exposed wires, unfinished walls, a bathroom that had been gutted for 6 weeks. "This isn't getting finished, is it?" Blake packed his tools without answering. At the door, he turned back. "I'll need the rest of the payment before we can continue. Materials costs have gone up." After he left, I made one phone call. "Building Inspection Department, this is John. I need to report unsafe construction work at my address." I gave her my information and explained the situation. No permits, questionable electrical work, a contractor who'd been lying about his credentials. "We can have an inspector out there Thursday morning," the clerk, Carla, said. "In the meantime, don't use any of the electrical or plumbing that's been done." "What if the contractor comes back before then?" "Sir, if there's unpermitted work happening, you have every right to stop it. No one should be doing electrical or plumbing without proper permits and inspections." Thursday came, and Blake showed up at the same time as Inspector Williams, a thin man in his 50s who carried a clipboard and wore an expression like he'd seen everything twice. "Mr. Morrison, I understand you have some concerns about the work being done here," Williams said. Blake stepped forward before I could answer. "This is just a routine inspection, right? We're always happy to cooperate with the city, Inspector." Williams looked at Blake's truck, then at the chaos visible through my front door. Are you the contractor? Blake Morrison. Morrison Construction. Been working in this area for 15 years. License number. Blake fumbled in his wallet and produced a card. Inspector Williams examined it, then made a note on his clipboard. This expired 8 months ago. There must be some mistake. I renewed. It online. I'll check with the licensing board. Inspector Williams walked past Blake into my house. I followed, leaving Blake standing on the porch. What happened next took 2 hours. Inspector Williams examined every piece of work Blake had done, taking photos and making notes. He tested electrical outlets with a device that beeped alarmingly in several locations. He ran water in the bathroom sink and shook his head at the strange noises coming from the pipes. He measured gaps in the drywall and checked the level on surfaces that should have been flat. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be direct with you, Williams said. This work needs to stop immediately. I'm seeing code violations in every room. Blake had been following us around, getting increasingly agitated. Those are just minor adjustments, nothing that can't be fixed. Minor? Inspector Williams pointed to an electrical outlet that was visibly sparking. This is a fire hazard. And this plumbing work... He gestured to pipes that were clearly installed at the wrong angle. This could contaminate your water supply. Look, we can work something out, Blake said. Maybe schedule a re-inspection, once I've had time to make adjustments. Inspector Williams handed me a thick packet of papers. These are stop work orders. No further construction can happen until these violations are addressed by a licensed contractor. Blake's face had gone pale. You can't shut down my project over a few technicalities. Mr. Morrison, Inspector Williams said, addressing me, I strongly recommend you contact your insurance company and consider having the existing work inspected by an independent contractor. Some of what I'm seeing here could pose serious safety risks to your family. After the inspector left, Blake stood in my driveway looking like a man who just watched his world collapse. John, we can work this out. I can fix whatever he's concerned about. An expired license? That's just paperwork. I've got the experience. I held up the stop work orders. Says here you used unlicensed workers, installed electrical work that doesn't meet code, and did plumbing work without proper permits. It also says continuing this work could result in criminal charges. Blake's confident demeanor finally cracked. Look, maybe I cut a few corners, but I can make it right. Just give me another chance. You've had 3 months and $80,000. That was your chance. He got in his truck and drove away, but something told me this wasn't over. Inspector Williams called me Friday morning. Mr. Morrison, we ran a background check on Blake Morrison. His contractor's license was revoked, not expired. There's a pattern here. What kind of pattern? I asked. Unlicensed work, safety violations, complaints from homeowners. We've also discovered he's been using false permit numbers on other jobs. This goes beyond simple negligence. That afternoon, I drove to the city building department and met with Inspector Williams in person. He showed me a file that was thicker than my mortgage paperwork. Blake Morrison has been flagged by the licensing board for fraudulent practices. We've identified at least 12 other properties where he's done similar work. Other families like mine. Worse in some cases, he said. There's a house in Millwood where his electrical work caused a fire. The family lost everything. Another property where his plumbing work caused flooding that resulted in mold damage. Inspector Williams opened a folder and showed me photos that made my stomach turn. Electrical fires, water damage, structural problems that could have collapsed walls. Mr. Morrison, you stopped this at exactly the right time. If Blake had finished his work on my house, I might have been looking at similar damage. What happens now? I asked. We're launching a comprehensive investigation, Williams said. Every property Blake has worked on in the past 2 years will be inspected. If we find violations, he'll face criminal charges for each one. I thought about the $80,000, about my family living in a construction zone, about the danger we'd been living with for months. Is there any way to recover the money I paid him? That's a civil matter, but I'd recommend contacting an attorney. With this level of documented fraud, you might have a strong case. When I got home, Claire was waiting with a concerned expression. Derek called. He wants to look at the electrical work Blake did. Derek arrived an hour later with another electrician, named Pete, who'd been working commercial construction for 30 years. They spent 45 minutes examining Blake's work, using tools that beeped and flashed in ways that didn't seem good. "John, this is criminal," Derek said finally. "Half these outlets aren't grounded. This wire here?" He pointed to something behind my kitchen wall. "It's not even rated for residential use. Looks like industrial cable. Completely wrong for this. Application." Pete nodded grimly. "I've seen work like this before. The guy's either completely incompetent or he's intentionally using substandard materials to increase his profit margin. How much to fix it?" Derek and Pete exchanged glances. "Honestly, you're looking at rewiring the entire house," Derek said, "and that's just the electrical. I can't speak to the plumbing, but if it's anything like this..." He gestured around. "The room. You might be better off starting over." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Claire and went through every piece of paperwork Blake had given me. Contracts that referenced materials that never arrived, invoices for work that was never completed, references from other customers who, when I called them, had never heard of Blake Morrison. "He planned this from the beginning," Claire said quietly. "The rushed timeline, the pressure to sign immediately, the cash payments to workers. I should have seen it. We both should have. But we trusted him because we wanted to believe someone could make our house beautiful." I looked around at the destruction Blake had left behind. Exposed wires, half-finished walls, a bathroom that would need to be completely rebuilt. $80,000 of damage disguised as renovation. That's when I decided Blake Morrison was going to face every consequence of what he'd done to my family and the others. Monday morning, I called Inspector Williams. "I want to file formal complaints, not just for my house, but for every family. Blake is hurt." "Are you willing to testify?" he asked. "I'll do whatever it takes." Williams connected me with Detective Sarah Chen from the Fraud Division. Detective Chen explained that building code violations could be prosecuted as criminal fraud when contractors knowingly endangered families for profit. "We'll need detailed documentation, photos, contracts, receipts, correspondence, everything." "You have." I'd been documenting Blake's work since week 2. Photos of every crooked outlet, every gap in the drywall, every surface that wasn't level. Financial records showing exactly what I'd paid for versus what I'd received. Text messages, where Blake had made promises he never kept. "This is excellent," Detective Chen said, reviewing my files. "We're building a case against Blake Morrison for fraud, criminal endangerment, and operating without proper licenses. Your documentation could be crucial for other victims." She explained that the investigation would take time. Other homeowners needed to come forward. Properties needed to be inspected. Blake's financial records would be subpoenaed to trace where the money had gone. "In the meantime, do not contact Blake Morrison directly. If he approaches you, document everything, but don't engage. I didn't have to wait long. Blake showed up at my house Wednesday evening looking desperate. "John, please, I need to talk to you." I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Behind me, the sounds of legitimate construction work echoed through the house. Steve Henderson's crew had been making steady progress, rewiring everything Blake had touched and rebuilding the bathroom from scratch. "You destroyed my entire business with one phone call," Blake said. "I called the building inspection department. They did the rest." Blake's hands were shaking. "The city revoked my license permanently. Every project I was working on got shut down. Clients are suing me for breach of contract. How many families were you putting in danger?"